Frye and Sanders, head-to-head in the final weeks of the San Diego mayoral race, and Governor Schwarzenegger going directly to the voters to approve his agenda. Those are next on The Body Politic. Good evening and welcome to The Body Politic. I'm Michael Bernstein, Professor of History and Dean of Arts and Humanities here at the University of California, San Diego. When San Diego Mayor Dick Murphy announced last April that he was resigning just months into his second term, he turned the normally laid-back San Diego into a national spectacle. Among the first to declare her candidacy to replace him was Donna Frye, the council member who had previously challenged Murphy as a write-in candidate and who had received the most votes, but did not become mayor because many of her write-in votes were not counted. A short time later, Jerry Sanders jumped into the race. He had served in the San Diego Police Department for 26 years, 6 of them as chief of police, and then went on to head the United Way and the Red Cross here in San Diego. Frye and Sanders beat a host of other candidates in the July primary and are now headed into the special runoff election, which will be held November 8th. Here to discuss what's going on in the final weeks of this unexpected and unusual campaign is Steve Erie, a professor of political science and director of UCSD's Urban Studies and Planning program. Welcome, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Delighted to be here.
You've had a chance to see the debate between Donna Frye and Jerry Sanders that was held here on the UCSD campus recently. What was your assessment of the outcome of that discussion?
First, I think this is the most important mayoral election in San Diego in over 30 years, since Pete Wilson was elected. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Yes, I did see the debate, and I just want to mention a couple of things, kind of the highlights. First, the debate itself, the dynamic of the debate was emblematic of the campaign itself, the campaign dynamic. Jerry Sanders, I thought, started quickly out of the gate. Donna was a little slower and more tentative, but as the debate progressed, she grew stronger and stronger, a marathon runner, as it were. And at the end, it was very interesting, the closing remarks. Jerry Sanders, right, sort of turned to the attack mode. There was a mean-spiritedness there that we've seen increasingly as the campaign has grown more competitive in the last couple of weeks. Secondly, I think what you saw there was the difference between a too-scripted candidate and a too-unscripted candidate. What I mean by that is that Jerry Sanders is on message an awful lot of the time. And part of that message is the need to attack, and secondly, it's the need to make Donna Frye appear as an insider, as in a sense, right, a Murphy clone. And that's going to be a very hard act to pull off. With Donna, the problem is she's so honest, she lets everything hang out. When you're talking about the Department of Peace, the unscripted kind of thing.
It raises an interesting point here. I mean, both candidates, it appears here in early October that the themes in both campaigns are both running as outsiders.
Both are trying to run as outsiders. The question is, right, who is the real outsider? I think Donna Frye has established a record, particularly since she met the pension board whistleblower, Diane Chipione, that she has been an outsider on a whole host of votes in the city council. A lot of them have been, like 8-1. But the thing is, the outsider is where the public is today. You need somebody to shake up City Hall, and so it has forced Jerry Sanders, in a sense, right, to follow Donna in that along that.
What we saw in
path.
the debate, it was clear in the debate that Jerry Sanders was eager to characterize Donna Frye as an insider. He kept referring to her as Council Member Frye to try and remind his audience that indeed she sits on the City Council, and he then was characterizing himself, positioning himself as a proverbial outsider. All this with a quarter-century service to the San Diego police force. But this seems to be the goal of both campaigns right now, as you say.
It seems to be the goal of both campaigns. But the question is, right, can Jerry Sanders pull it off in the way that Donna Frye can pull it off. And I'm not so sure about that, particularly when you see the kind of endorsements that Jerry Sanders is getting now, the Chamber of Commerce, the Union Tribune, the establishment. The question is, as an establishment-endorsed candidate, can you then run as an outsider? We'll know over the course of the next couple of weeks.
Well, that's right. The polls right now are showing the race to be quite competitive.
The race is tightening, Michael. A month ago, I think it was Jerry Sanders to lose. Now, in a sense, it's becoming closer and closer. There's a little difference between a couple of the polls. And that has made an awful lot of the downtown, the insiders, very, very nervous. So watch closely. If the polling continues to show over the next couple of weeks, as we approach November 8th, that it's too close to call, what you're going to see is that we're moving towards a ground game. It will all be about turnout and get out the vote, particularly with a small number of undecided
I want to
voters.
get to the matter of turnout, but on the polling data again, are there neighborhood breakdowns on the voting? Are there ethnic breakdowns or income category breakdowns that show any trends one way or the other?
Well, the thing is that the numbers are so small in terms of the number of likely voters. You're down to about 600 or 700 in these polls. It's really hard to break them down further.
One issue that has emerged, at least in these closing weeks of the race, is a sort of different positioning of these candidates with respect to minority communities in the city. Sanders, in the debate, seemed to go out of his way to indicate his engagement with certain minority communities in town. Donna Frye seemed less on message, as you say, on that particular matter. Do you have a read on that difference between the candidates?
Yes, and I'm surprised that Donna, in a sense, right, is not working harder to sort of embrace minority communities, the Hispanic community, the gay lesbian community, the African American community. But we'll have to see what happens over the next couple of weeks, because we're really moving into a ground game, into get out the vote. And of course, the great uncertainty in all of this is that this is part of a state special election, and there will be a turnout dynamic produced by that as well. And I think that's the big wild card right now.
You're expecting high turnout because of the special election?
Yes, I am expecting a high turnout. And as I said, I think that this is the most important mayoral race in San Diego in over 30 years. What happens will be incredibly consequential. We are facing a major fiscal crisis, and it's, as both of them now realize, it's more than the pension. It's infrastructure. It's unfunded basic city services. We're talking not 1.4 billion, we're talking 3, 4, and 5 billion. We're talking long term. This is not something that's going to go away in a year or two. The question is, how are we going to attack it? The candidates have come out right with different programs. Donna Frye's is, I think, the bolder, the more comprehensive, and ironically, given the way that she's characterized, the tougher on labor. In terms, she really wants emergency powers to be a czar, to unilaterally deal with these things, and she's not afraid to use the T word, which is a 4-letter word here in San Diego. It's taxes. And frankly, at some point, we're going to have to face higher taxes to get out of all of these crises over the next several years.
Well, I do want to return to one other matter on turnout, but let's just follow up here on the issue of financial challenges facing the city. Can either one of these candidates, no matter what they're saying now in the campaign in the next few weeks, avoid taking the city into bankruptcy when they become mayor, either one of them?
It's going to be very difficult not to consider bankruptcy as your option. But let's wait and see what the next, 4 to 6 months. But bankruptcy is
neither one of them want to talk about it right now.
Not to talk about it now for obvious reasons, right? But bankruptcy is a real possibility that we have to face.
On turnout, just one more item on the polling data and your very interesting observations on turnout. There appear at the moment to be very few undecided voters as far as the pollsters are concerned. What's your read there? Or do we see a great mass of people waiting to the last minute on this?
Michael, depending upon which poll you look at, there's either 3% undecided, which is absolutely amazing, or there's 13% undecided, which is probably the case. My sense is that most voters have made up their mind. The question is, who's going to go to the poll? There probably is that 8 to 10% still undecided or waffling. And in a sense, much of the campaign will be to appeal to them over the next several weeks, but also the question is, who can you get absentee ballots to? You know, that's a key part of the banking strategy that's being used today. And who can you get to the polls?
So in terms of strategy, you would anticipate over the remaining weeks of this campaign, just a few weeks to go, focused on turnout issues, it sounds like?
It'll focus on turnout, and it'll focus on core constituencies. If the race continues to show, in terms of the polling, tightness in the next couple of weeks, the question is, does Jerry Sanders then morph into Steve Francis? And you're already beginning to see that process with the proposal to cut the city payroll by 10% to, in a sense, appeal to high-propensity
So essentially to be moving
voters.
right. Steve Francis was the businessman who ran in the primary considerably to Sanders' right, and at least in the primary, and Frye, of course.
Right.
So you're suggesting that Sanders will be moving rightward in the weeks ahead.
If, as I said, there's real tightness in the polls, and then it's a question, right, of high-propensity voters.
You mentioned core constituencies. Let's talk a little bit about that, because you made an interesting observation a moment ago about Donna Frye, who is associated with having the core constituency of organized labor, nonetheless having some pretty tough words in her financial plan for organized labor. How do you see the breakdown in special interest groups in this election, as best you can see it in these waning weeks?
Starting with Donna, I mean, Donna has talked tough with respect to the municipal unions.
Right.
But
because of the fiscal crisis.
Because of the fiscal crisis, that they're going to have to share some of the burden and sacrifice. She's also talking about voters having to share that sacrifice, if we have to use the
That's
tax
the T word. Right.
That's the T word. But then there is the Labor Council, that is the Federation of Labor, which is much broader than the municipal unions. They've endorsed Donna. They're contributing to the campaign. They will be critical in terms of getting out the vote. So in a sense, right, it's really a divided labor constituency with respect to Frye. And ironically, of the two fiscal plans, Donna's plan is the one that appears to be tougher on labor. With Jerry, it's interesting, the Chamber of Commerce of San Diego, for the first time in over 40 years, has endorsed a mayoral candidate. A lot of us found that very surprising. The question is, does that help him or does that hurt him? And when I say does it help him, I'm not sure that it changes anybody's mind who would have otherwise voted for Jerry Sanders. The question is, does the endorsement then make him the establishment candidate? And there has been this populist sort of insurgency. Mike Aguirre, Diane Chipione of the last 4 or 5 years. If you look at the history of San Diego politics, we've been sort of a business-friendly, business has been, in a sense, the dominant player.
Development-oriented city.
In politics for years. Now, business influence relative to the era of Fletcher, to the era of C. Arnold Smith has waned. In the 90s, labor became a player as well. But now there's this third force, this kind of populist insurgency. Donna is trying to capitalize on that. In a sense, this is sort of the genie is out of the bottle in terms of sort of, voter discontent.
Well, it promises to be an amazing day on Election Day. One of these individuals is going to be the next mayor of our city. What kind of mayor do you see Donna Frye or Jerry Sanders being, especially given the fact that the new mayor will be the first mayor to serve in this strong mayor format, as it's called, where the mayor has increased powers vis-a-vis the city council and so forth. Can you give us a quick summary on what you see the two of them doing, either one winning the office in this strong mayor
Michael,
position?
It's incredibly ironic. Both of these candidates campaiged against the strong mayor
proposition.
And now, particularly Donna Frye, thinks that it's not strong enough. She wants additional fiscal powers and is willing to go to the voters. Actually, the strong mayor system is a misnomer. It's really a strong mayor, strong council system, and I was there from day one in terms of crafting this. There is as much power given to the city council, the ability to override with only 5 out of 8 votes. That's not a 2/3, most of what the mayor can do. The requirement that the council approve the mayor's budget, approve the appointments, etc., etc. What that means is that both of them initially have to deal with the city council. And it's interesting in terms of the debate so far, rarely is, in a sense, the relationship with the city council mentioned in terms of the current debate. But it takes two to tango or tangle in this new system of government. But I think what you're going to see is, and they both have different ways of sort of dealing with the executive branch. Jerry wants to sort of be a chief executive officer, have somebody run things on a day-to-day basis. Donna is looking at sort of a cabinet system. But regardless of how they use the powers, I think if Donna Frye is elected, you're going to see a very different way of doing development in this city. You're going to see more public benefit that has to be built in, more environmental benefit, more mitigation.
And similarly, with not similar in terms of their political agendas, but similarly informed, if Jerry Sanders were to win, he would be reorganizing the mayor's office in a new way, in light of this strong mayor, as you say, strong council format as well. One final question along the lines of either one of these individuals winning. One of them will be our next mayor. The winner of this race has the somewhat unenviable task then of serving a short term. It'll be a 3-year term because of Dick Murphy's abrupt resignation and now this special election to fill the seat. So they'll have a 3-year shot. Then they would be faced with a decision to pursue re-election for a full term or not. The question is, can either one of these people, Donna Frye or Jerry Sanders, avoid being simply a 3-year mayor and out?
Look, if they're serious about solving this problem and asking for sacrifice from everyone, we know that people don't like to do that, and the great likelihood is that we will have a one-term, short-term mayor, in which case we will revisit all of this 3 years from now after Dick Murphy's unexpired term. The thing is, it's going to require unpopular choices, hard choices that call for sacrifice from everyone. The question is, this is laid-back San Diego. We haven't been called upon to make those kinds of sacrifices before, but we are entering a new era to get out of this mess, of which the pension is just the tip of the iceberg, right? It's going to take real leadership, unpopular leadership, and of course, there's real risk that the voters may turn away from that call to sacrifice at the end of 3 years.
Thanks very much, Steve.
You're welcome.
My guest has been Steve Erie, Director of the Urban Studies and Planning Program and a Professor of Political Science here at UC San Diego. Next up, Propositions 74 through 77, the ballot initiatives that comprise the so-called reform agenda of Governor Schwarzenegger. I'd now like to welcome Thad Kousser, an assistant professor of political science here at UC San Diego and an expert on the state initiative process. The governor has a set of propositions on the ballot, Propositions 74, 75, 76, and 77. What is he trying to do with these initiatives?
The governor started the year with 4 main issues that he called the Year of Reform, and he spoke about them in the State of the State address. 2 of those have survived into propositions. The spending cap, which is Proposition 76, and the Redistricting Commission, which is Proposition 77. 2 of them have undergone some changes. He talked about merit pay for teachers at the beginning of the year. That didn't meet a lot of popular support, and so it's been replaced by Proposition 74, which is a reduction in the amount of time, a lengthening of the amount of time it takes for teachers to get tenure. The second one was an initiative that would have made public employee union retirement benefits much like retirement benefits in the private sector. That ran into a buzzsaw of political opposition, and now he's endorsed Proposition 75, which limits the use of public employee dues for political purposes. So 4 themes continued, but some of the details have changed over the years.
So overall, the 4 initiatives as a package are really part of an effort by the governor to go over the legislature's heads, as it were, to the people and try to govern by referendum.
Governed by initiative, right. This is something that's been a theme since the governor won in recall, right? He was more popular with voters than his ideas were popular in the legislature initially, and so at the beginning of the year when he had 65% approval rating, this seemed like a great idea. Right now he's down in the low 30s for approval ratings, and some of his initiatives are suffering.
Well, let's walk through the propositions one by one. We'll go in order. Proposition 74, this is about probation periods for public school teachers.
This is teacher tenure. So right now, if you're a public school teacher, teacher, the first 2 years you serve, you can be fired at any time and you don't get a hearing. After 2 years, you have to have a couple of bad performance reviews, and then you go through a complex hearing process where it has about 12 steps, and you have about 3 months to improve before you can be let go. That's what tenure does for teachers. Proposition 74 would lengthen that probation period in which teachers could sort of be immediately fired from 2 years to 5 years, putting California, with a couple other states, as sort of the longest probationary periods in the country.
This would be one of the longest in the country.
This would be one of the 2 longest, one of the 3 longest in the country if it passed. And it would also make it easier for school districts to dismiss teachers who had a couple bad reviews. They wouldn't have to go through all the 12 steps of this process. They wouldn't get the 3 months to improve their scores. To improve their ratings. So the idea is to make it easier to get bad teachers out of the system.
Well, interesting aspect to this, though. Just a few years ago, the big buzzwords in the state about the quality of public education had to do with class size and issues of that nature, the need to legislate restrictions on class size, increase the flow of money to the classrooms, and so forth. But now we're talking about probation periods for teachers. How do we get from one to the other?
Well, class size and the big issues are still more important to voters than this issue. This issue is sort of a small issue, probably wouldn't have ended up on the ballot had it not been for the funding that Governor Schwarzenegger's campaign group for California's recovery project, if they hadn't put the funding for it probably wouldn't wound up on the ballot, because it's not a big issue in education policy right now. Sorry, the California Recovery Team is the name of that group.
Right, and actually this leads us into Prop 75. Prop 74, this issue about teacher probation periods, it confronts directly the teacher unions in the state. So now we have Proposition 75, which is taking on unions directly about the use of their membership fees for political action.
Right. Public employee unions right now are some of the most powerful political actors in the state, both on the left and the right. The California Teachers Association, which has generally been on the left, and the California Correctional Peace Officers Association, which has generally been on the right. Both of them use some portion of their members' dues for political purposes. Now, if you're a teacher, you don't have to be a member of the union, but if you are a member of the union, usually some portion of your dues will be used for the political campaigns in which they take part. Proposition 75 would say that if I'm a union member, every year I have to fill out a form granting my express permission for any portion of my dues to be used for political purposes. The proponents of this say it's just fair. It's your money. You should have to grant permission. The opponents say it places a restriction on unions that corporations, the other powerful interest in California, don't have to fulfill. Their shareholders don't have to sign anything. So those are the pro and con arguments. And this is arguably the most important proposition for changing the balance of power and pass it in Sacramento, the balance of political power. So if it passes, unions are going to be severely limited in their power, and Governor Schwarzenegger may have some more luck with some of his policy proposals.
Well, speaking of spending, we have Proposition 76 on spending limits with respect to state expenditures generally and the public schools again. How does that one work?
So right now California does have a spending limit, but it's essentially a dead letter. It essentially doesn't constrain state spending, and we have had some budget deficits possibly because of that. Proposition 76 would say state spending can only grow at last year's baseline plus the average growth in the previous 3 years. So if the state's income has been doing well in the last 3 years, then the state can grow the next year. If it's been doing fairly poorly, then it's locked into a fairly slow rate of growth. This would also affect school spending because close to half of state expenditures go to the public schools, and this would reduce the amount of money that would be guaranteed to schools under Proposition 98, which passed in 1988 and remains very popular. And the fact that it would reduce the Proposition 98 guarantee of money that goes to schools, that's made this initiative poll quite poorly, and right now it's really trailing.
Is this something like the line item veto that so many state governors have wanted over the years, to be able to redline specific projects in a state budget?
Sure, there's another aspect in this that I didn't bring up. California already has a line item veto, as do 42 other states. So right now, the legislature can pass a spending item, the governor can line it out, strike it out unilaterally, and then the legislature can override that with a 2/3 vote. What this initiative, Proposition 76, would allow Governor Schwarzenegger and any future governor to do is to strike out a line of spending and not give the legislature any opportunity to override that. So it would allow the governor to have a unilateral power without checks and balances, and that also hasn't led to a lot of popular support.
Again, another real shift in power between the executive branch and the legislature. So that, of course, then brings us to the whole question of the composition of power in the legislature and in the executive branch, and this has to do with the Redistricting Initiative 77.
Right. So for the third time in the last few decades, this would propose a redistricting commission that would take redistricting out of the hands of the legislature. Right now, the state assembly and state senate, they draw the lines for their own offices, for the State Board of Equalization, and for California congressional districts. It would take the power out of their hands and place it in a commission of retired judges. Now, the two other attempts have failed badly, and right now this initiative is trailing in the polls, although there's still some undecided voters. What it would do is set up 3 retired judges who have stayed out of politics and promised to stay out of politics for a while. It would turn over the redistricting process to them in 2006. So districts would be redrawn now rather than waiting for the 2010 census, which is traditionally when we redistrict in California. And they would draw these lines, and they would have to not pay any attention to the political partisan makeup of a particular area or where the incumbents live. So the idea is they're not going to guarantee incumbents a district that's where they currently live right now, and they would also have to just follow geographic boundaries and not be able to gerrymander political districts.
Gerrymandering being the strange shapes of some districts to include certain constituencies, but not others.
That make them look like salamanders.
Any oversight proposed here? I mean, are these judges just rule and then the matter's closed, or is there other oversight or appeals to this process?
Sure. Well, there could be judicial challenges, and this is one area where the courts have stepped in to play a large role in redistricting to guarantee that all districts have about an equal number of people in them, and to make sure that minority voting rights aren't taken away. So those sort of judicial interventions would still be available. Also, redistricting plans in the past could always be challenged by a referendum. So the vote of the people in the sort of something like the initiative process would always be able to overturn plans, and California voters have done that before. This would slightly change that process. Voters would be able to overturn a plan, but not until after the people elected under that plan served a full term. So it would sort of delay the popular check on these districts that voters have right now.
With normal legislative election. Finally, in going to the voters for these, clearly the governor has high hopes of having greater sway over the outcome of political debates in the state. What does this have to do with his re-election strategies, which now that he's announced his intention to seek another term?
Right. At the beginning of the year, this was a move to increase Governor Schwarzenegger's policy objectives. He was going to use his very high personal popularity to push these initiatives through that he couldn't get through the legislature. Now, in the summer, he came very close to negotiated deals on most of these issues with the legislature. Legislature said they were willing to do a redistricting, a spending cap of some sort, a redistricting commission of some sort. Instead, he decided to go to the voters in an attempt to raise his personal approval rating, to score a big political victory. This is sort of his bottom of the ninth, last chance to score a big political victory before he has to run for re-election in 2006. Right now he's not doing badly, but if he can pull it out with some of these initiatives and pass something, this could be his comeback that could lead to a good election.
Great momentum. Thank you, Thad. That's it for this edition of The Body Politic. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Michael Bernstein here at the University of California, San Diego, reminding you once again to vote on November 8th. Good night.